right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to TAPED Crusaders, the podcast that reviews every single superhero thingamabob ever made. I'm your co-host, Michael. Josh is sick today, but we are joined by Champion.
I am Joshua Mervell's understudy tonight.
Thank you for joining us, Ian.
Thank you very much for having me again on this podcast.
Of course, the man who has never read a single superhero comic.
Nor will I ever, lest I be kicked off this podcast.
Yeah,
because
you'll lose your special status. All right. And also coming back for another Superman movie. This is Jordan Krug. Thanks for joining us, Jordan.
Happy to be back.
So let's talk about, today's episode is a special one. We're talking about Superman 3. And I'm going to let you kind of give a brief backstory to this movie. Because you know more about the inside stuff than we do, I think, right?
Yeah. Well,
definitely more than I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, the producers had a huge hit with the first Superman movie. But they decided to save some money and not bring back the director, Richard Donner, for the second Superman movie. They didn't want to bring back Brando or pay him for the footage they already shot, so they saved money there. And they still had a massive hit. Superman 2 is a massive hit. So they said, well, we're not doing anything wrong. Let's bring back Richard Lester, who was the co-director of Superman 2, and we'll get him to do his own movie. And we'll go with a comedy style. We'll get a comedy star to star alongside Reeve, and so obviously Richard Pryor. And I think that they felt that everything they were doing at the time was the right direction for the series.
Right. Now, I saw this movie probably 84 when it was out on video, and I definitely remember enjoying it. However, when it came time to buy them all on VHS, I only bought 1 and 2, and I watched those over and over and over when I was like a tween. Okay. Ian, had you ever seen this movie before?
I had. It didn't really register in my brain at any point. There was 1 or 2 scenes that when I watched them again this time around, they jumped out at me like, oh shit, that's where that's from. Like
Sure.
this, like the scene where what's her face gets turned into a robot.
Yeah,
at the very
one
end.
of the best scenes.
That scarred me on some level as a kid. That was moderately terrifying. It's like, oh, that's where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
My fear of robots.
I think that, when Superman 1 premiered on TV, it was a big deal. When Superman 2 premiered on TV, it was a big deal. They made it like a primetime thing. But when Superman 3 came out and it didn't really make a ton of money at the box office, I think they sold the TV rights to everyone and everywhere. So Superman 3, I remember being on TV all the time.
Interesting.
All the time. So I think that's why more people remember it.
It was sort of unavoidable to watch it.
It's funny. I mentioned before my Russian roommate, he walked by this TV when I was watching it. He's like, I have seen this movie in childhood. So even in Russia, Superman 3 was on all the time. Let's briefly, again, we don't do research on the show, but let's talk about some of the aborted ideas, because I know the biggest thing for me is they wanted to use Brainiac as the main bad guy, right?
Right, and that's sort of where all the computer stuff comes in at the end there, sort of as a replacement for that idea.
Right.
I don't know too much else.
Okay, because I don't either. But Ian, are you familiar with the character Brainiac?
No, tell me a bit about Brainiac.
So Brainiac is a 12th level intelligence alien computer from the planet Kolu.
12th level, is that a lot?
It's a lot, yes. On a scale of 1 to 10, he's a 12.
Oh.
Okay.
Come on, read your comics.
Yeah,
Ian.
come on. He has green skin, he's bald, and he has like 3 diodes on his head, kind of. Pink suit, awesome. Has a monkey on his shoulder in early appearances. Anyway, he's like Superman's second biggest villain. Okay.
Okay.
It would have been great to have him in this movie. It would have been great if maybe halfway through the computer becomes Brainiac. What are we going to say?
Right, well, I mean, yeah, you got Robert Vaughn, who's essentially Lex Luthor
Yes.
light. You know what I mean? Like, what?
Right.
That's what they came up with. They're like, well, we can't bring back Lex Luthor, so let's just bring back another guy who's kind of like Lex Luthor.
I know. I thought about that. And for some reason, I didn't think about that until this time around, where I'm like, this is just Lex Luthor. That's all it is. Yeah.
Right.
100%. Okay, so now the other thing I don't know if you noticed this, Lois Lane is in the movie for 5 seconds. Okay?
Was it 5 seconds? Or was it less than 5 seconds?
It was possibly less. She had like 2 lines.
Yeah. I'm
going to
going on a
Bermuda.
trip. See you later.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. She flashes a bikini and runs away.
Filmed on the same day, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
And that was rumored to be revenge by the Sulkines, right? Like, oh, you spoke out against us in public. We're going to kick you out of this movie, basically, right?
Yeah, they basically wrote her out. Although I will say I didn't mind it because I think that the love interest replacement, I actually really like.
Yes,
I really like that part of the story, and it's interesting because Lois is in love with Superman, but couldn't give two shits about Clark Kent.
Yep.
Whereas in this movie, it's the woman is falling for Clark Kent, not Superman. So it's an interesting change up.
Great point. Now, okay, anyone who's watching this review has probably seen the movie, but let's just give a brief plot summary. Champion, would you like to do that?
I could try.
Okay.
All right, I have to.
And you can give like a 60-second version.
Yeah. I've watched so much Superman in the last couple of weeks that all the stuff is starting to meld together.
Sure.
But this basically revolves around Richard Pryor, who is revealed at the beginning of the film to be a perpetually unemployed drain on society. He gets kicked off the rolls, and then he sees a matchbook offering a job working as a computer programmer, which he turns out to be some sort of savant at. And he is noticed by Robert Vaughn, who is working for, he owns the company that Richard Pryor's working for. Gus Grimley, is that his name?
Something like that.
Gus Grimley. He ends up doing like a sausage slicing scheme where he collects all the half pennies from everyone's paycheck and he gets them deposited to his paycheck.
Gus Gorman.
Grimley. Where am I getting Grimley from? Doesn't matter. So he gets caught, and his intelligence is appreciated by the villainous. What's Robert Vaughn's character's name?
If we did research, we would know. But you know what? We can.
I have an excuse because I'm not supposed to know this stuff.
Ross Webster.
Yeah,
Ross
obviously
Webster.
it's Ross Webster.
Okay, so he runs this company, and he has these evil plans. The first evil plan is that he wants to destroy all the coffee beans in Colombia for some reason, and we're supposed to give a shit. So Gus, he is sort of his lackey, and he uses computers to inflict all of these woes upon people. He uses the computer to change a weather satellite into a weather machine, which
to control the weather instead of
to control the weather,
yeah.
because that's all it takes is some programming.
Yeah.
So he destroys all the crops, but Superman saves all the crops. Oh, what happens next? Something with oil tankers?
Yeah, then he decides, if we can control the coffee market, now we can control the oil market. So we'll make all the oil tankers go into one spot, and then we'll basically hold them hostage. Yeah.
So, Superman, there's this one tanker that sort of wanders away from the rest of them, and Jesus. That's right.
He uses his heat vision to...
Superman is gifted this piece of artificial kryptonite that Gus has got most of the recipe for, but not quite all of it, and it's not enough to kill him, but it just turns him evil. So Superman runs around doing all these evil things.
Yes,
and one of oh my goodness, this weirdly intelligent but pretends to be a hussy. He's like
she's like the Miss Tessmacher, but a different name. But she's pretending to be a bimbo, but she's actually very intelligent, well-read.
So she tries to seduce Superman in order to get him to destroy this boat. There's a weird fight that isn't really explained.
Well, no, what happens is Superman is slowly turning evil. So he's doing all these evil, like he's going around, he's smashing the oil tanker. Because she told him to. Yeah. He's turning, he's tilting.
He's straightening the Tower of Pisa.
The Tower of Pisa. He's doing all these other things. The famous scene, he's sitting in the bar, flicking the peanuts at the
That's a great
mirror.
scene. That's a great scene.
And then he kind of eventually gets to the point where he's like, he goes into this junkyard and splits into two halves.
And that's the weird thing. Like, how does he split into two? And he has a fight with himself, which is a great fight scene.
It's a great.
I mean, you're
how
questioning
he got
that
there is kind of.
But at the crosswalk, the Don't Walk Man and the Walkman, the Don't Walk Man crawls up into the Walkman symbol, and they fight. So once that happens, it's like all bets are off.
All bets are off. But let's so getting back to the plot, basically then...
Clark Kent prevails and defeats evil Superman, and he goes to fix everything. And that's...
And then they fight the supercomputer that Gus has requested.
That
they build in like a valley somewhere in a cave. And the supercomputer is operated by the bad guy and his sister.
Right.
And then the bimbo is kind of there, but not really on their side.
She's not really important to that scene.
Yeah, I'm just pointing out that she's sort of like rooting for Superman, and Gus is certainly not helping them. And then throughout the fight, Gus ends up helping Superman win, so Superman forgives him, and then he kind of leaves the bad guys there, brings Gus to a
coal mine,
and says, you could do worse than give this man a job. So he's, Superman saving the day. But then Gus decides he doesn't even want the job. He's just going to walk back to Metropolis. That ends up that story. And then I think that's the end.
Yeah, see, it all seems very slight because the first two movies, you got Superman's origin story, and Lex Luthor wants to be rich, but he also wants to take over the world. And in the second one, you got the super villains. They want to get revenge. And the third one, Ross Webster, he just wants to be rich. He just wants more money. He wants to use computers to get rich.
And we don't even meet him until 45 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
Which, okay, you know what? Okay, so let's talk about that. We're going to talk about the quality of the movie in a minute. But as far as the stakes, I don't think the stakes are necessarily bad, because one thing I don't like about superhero movies is that every single superhero movie, or to me, should not be the end of the world, right? Like it's the end of the world again. Even with Mr. Freeze, I'm going to freeze Gotham. I actually like the idea that he just wants to control the coffee market, but however, it would have been better if we didn't know that and Superman had to figure it out. Then it becomes more like a detective story, right?
It's weird. This movie is it's more of a Richard Pryor movie than it is a Superman movie.
That's certainly true.
I will say though, like if we're talking about the movie on an overall scale, I would argue it's almost as good as Superman 2, only because it's more consistent. It has one tone, it has one director, and it does have some great moments, and it's got budget. Like, they were cutting corners wherever they could, but you still bring back, you still got Perry White, you still got Christopher Reeve, you still got Margot Kidder briefly, but you got Jimmy Olsen. Like it's all the main cast. They're still at the Daily Planet. Like there's a lot of holdovers from the first two movies, and it's one director, and it's still got a good budget because they made a lot of money on the second movie. So I don't. It is the weakest of the three. But it actually, like as just a movie, it's not that bad. It's all right.
I actually agree with you, especially watching it this time. I really enjoyed, like I had to ignore Superman 1 and 2 and just enjoy it on its own. And I actually thought this is a pretty good movie. It might taper a little bit in the end, but I think the thing is, considering the movie does go too far with the comedy sometimes, some of the serious scenes in the movie are actually really good. And I want to mention at the beginning of the movie when Superman goes to the fire at the chemical plant. Everything in that scene is 100% serious.
Yeah.
He flies down, he talks to the fire chief, and the guy's like, get this man a helmet. Oh, it's you. Okay, never mind. It's not played for laughs. It's like if Superman was real, this is how people would treat him.
And there's a lot of tension with the acid is going to explode, and Jimmy Olsen's hurt, and
yes.
That's a great scene. It's funny because the movie starts with Superman saves a kid that gets flung into a tree, and then he saves a guy who's like drowning in his car because he's parked on a fire hydrant, and there's a lot of like silly stuff, and you're like, really, this is what Superman's up to these days? It's same old shit. But then you get that chemical fire, and it's the stakes are high, and it's a real good scene, and it's a novel idea to have him fly and freeze a lake and bring back the lake, and it's kind of an interesting way to solve that problem, you know?
Even before that, using the whatever that was, that giant pipe, and he's like,
using it as an escape slide.
And I love how he doesn't just fly at super speed, and no, he's creative. Like the writers are more creative about it. The other thing I gotta say, we'll let you talk in a minute. I gotta say, I've always loved the scene when Superman goes into that little room and that scientist is there and he's nervously pacing back and forth and looking at all the controls.
Oh yeah.
And he walks in, he's like, "Oh, hi, Superman." Again, it's treated like he's like Elvis, everyone in the world knows him. Everyone loves him. Everyone respects him. There's no BS. Just there's Superman. It's like, if there was something going on here and a cop showed up, maybe you knew the captain of the police.
Well, and the guy isn't like, oh, Superman save me. He's like, no. I have to stay here and make sure this shit doesn't explode.
Right.
To save everybody. Like, you do what you do, Superman, and I'll do what I do.
Yes, I love that. And also the fact that Superman doesn't know. He's like, well, what is this? He doesn't know everything. Well, what are these chemicals? Well, they do this, and Superman, the look in his face, it's just everything's treated so perfectly. I've always loved that.
I will say too, again, on an overall movie scale, I think this is actually Reeves' best performance. I think he understands the character. He's done it this is his third movie. He's not nervous about doing the character anymore. He's also in phenomenal shape. He's actually, I think, the most buff in this movie compared to the first two movies. I think it's his best performance. It's too bad it's in Superman 3.
You're right. Yeah.
And the script is not quite there, but yeah.
Ian, what did you think about this one compared to the first two, or on its own?
Well, the weakest that I've seen so far. It did have some spectacular scenes, right? The fire scene was great, but I hated that it came right on the heels of a 15-minute slapstick Rube Goldberg. Like,
I'll give you that.
What is happening? And I'm watching this with my jaw hanging open. Like, this is a Superman movie. But we have to shift mental gears, and now I have to take this movie seriously.
In defense of the movie, though, that is the credit sequence. So you could have had the same credit sequence you had in the first two movies, which is those titles zooming towards you, right? We could have done that for 10 minutes, which we do in the first two movies.
Well, yeah, we could have.
But in this movie, it's like, let's do the credits over something fun and show, like, I agree.
You want to set up the tone of the movie.
But that's Richard Lester's tone. He wants to do comedy. But
then this next serious scene, it doesn't fit. Mm-hmm. So what am I supposed to think this movie is?
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
Now, if I'd seen it a bunch of times, I could probably put that aside. But this is the first time that I'm seeing it as an adult, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a stupid movie. Oh, no, this is a serious movie. Oh, no, this is a stupid movie. Mm-hmm. I can't pick a tone, so I'm all over the place. My brain gets confused. Right? Now, your Christopher Reeve was fantastic in it. Mm-hmm. The scenes where he is evil Superman, very compelling. Mm-hmm. I believed it. I believed that he's just this jaded, I don't give a fuck, I'm tired of being a superhero. It worked, but there was just so much nonsense. Every time that Richard Pryor did anything, I just, why am I watching this?
There are huge leaps of logic. Like, I mentioned the two stoplights fighting. Richard Pryor. Why do they have a ski hill that ends at the edge of a building that they're skiing on, and he's the only one that goes to the edge, falls off the building, a skyscraper, falls 40 stories, lands on a slightly inclined window, which doesn't shatter, lands on his feet, and then descends onto the pavement.
You have to wonder if that was written completely backwards. Like, they started with Richard Pryor skiing across a busy Manhattan street in a pink nightgown,
right?
And it's like, how do we make this happen? Well,
yeah.
It's also funny that then he walks across the street instead of back into the headquarters. Like, just the whole thing.
Like, nobody's concerned at the top. Like, he's dead now.
The guy that's the crux of all our plans just fell off the edge of the building.
And by the way, was that practical? Like, were they there on that building? Because it looked, they actually zoomed in. It looked pretty real. Do you think it was real?
I'd have to watch it again.
It looked pretty decent.
I doubt it.
As an overall, we're not going to get into we talked about the plot. The special effects were still great. The flying scenes were great. There was a lot of times where Superman, especially at the beginning, he would fly in and fly out in these wide shots, and it's still 40 years later, you're like, that looks really good.
And I think I really think that the love story with him and Lana, which is Annette O'Toole,
Annette O'Toole? Yes, beautiful.
Really works. She's a great actress.
She actually is.
And
a great
you really
actress.
feel like, oh yeah, she's this small town girl who had this shitty husband, and that guy's a dick. And here comes the guy from high school she had a crush on, and you really feel like there's a real connection there.
And also, are you familiar with Smallville, the TV show?
Know that it exists.
Okay. Smallville, since I'm a Superman snob, I avoided it for like 20 years, okay? I started watching it. I love it, of course. It's great. Annette O'Toole plays Ma Kent. You know this, right? Like you said, she's actually a very good actress. And here's the thing. Of course, I know I'm only basing this on her character. I don't know what she's really like. But her innocence, she is an innocent, trusting, loving character. And it comes through in everything about her in that movie. And she's so good at it. Mm-hmm. And the scenes between her and Clark, I think it's interesting because if they would have kept Lois Lane, there could have been more of a love triangle later on, maybe.
Yeah.
But
you can feel though, like the script doing sort of somersaults because, okay, Clark works at the Daily Planet. He's got an idea for a story about his high school reunion in Smallville. So he goes to Smallville. He has he does a reunion. He meets Lana. Then he comes back to the Daily Planet for one scene, and then Lana calls him, and she's like, "Oh, my son, he's been talking about Superman. You got to come back." So then he comes back, but while he was in Smallville, he bumped into Gus Gorman. Gus Gorman happened to pick out of all the places that the company owns, the one subsidiary is in Smallville. He happens to be there. Then you know what I mean? And then Gus Gorman suddenly is now he's a military general. Like everything's very, very, very convoluted and twisted to try to make all this work.
Okay. We should point out that the original Superman 1 screenplay, the outline was by Mario Puzo, who did The Godfather. The rewrites were by Leslie and David Newman. The final draft was, what's his name? Tom Mankiewicz? Right.
Tom Mankiewicz, yes.
So Leslie and David Newman did work on Superman 1 and 2, and they also wrote 3. That's why I think you said the continuity's still there. There's still a strain of continuity with the creators, right? So they're not as good as Tom Mankiewicz, but they're still professional screenwriters.
And I feel for the team because you've got Richard Pryor. So what do? You just let him loose. If Richard Pryor's like, I want to be a general today and goof around. Okay, go for it. I want to put on a pink tablecloth and ski down a building. Okay, whatever. Sure. And even when he comes to he comes to Brad's work.
That's the best. It is the best.
And he's bought a suit, and now he's Southern, and he says he's got to get in there to do a job.
I got to get in there today. And it's that voice. That's his best character.
The guy is completely confused until he opens up a suitcase full of liquor, which again makes no sense. What job do he has to do?
He's a liquor installation technician.
And also, I like the fact that the sound mixing emphasizes that Brad cannot hear what he's saying, but Richard Pryor does not raise his voice, doesn't make any clear. He just stays in that character, and then that makes it even funnier, I think.
Tell me it's not Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, Ian, let's talk. What did you think of Richard Pryor in this film?
This was Richard Pryor's film.
Okay.
This was all about him, and I don't know. It seemed like there was a lot of improv, like it was a lot of just off the cuff, like it was a lot of just do what you want. I don't know what his star power would have been like back then, but I imagine he was the main draw of that film. So
I think it was slightly waning.
Yeah, that's
what at that time.
Read. Yeah,
but I mean, his character really is a very strange character because they established him at the beginning, like you said, he can't hold a job, he can't do anything. He's in one computer class, and the guy's like, some girl's like, I can't. How do I do 2 coordinates? And the guy comes over and he looks at Richard Pryor's computer and he's like, oh, you did it. How'd you do it? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, well, is he a genius or he's just an idiot? But I will say the scheme to steal the rounded off sense, it's actually kind of a genius script writing, of course, but then they throw it away again. So you're like, oh, okay, he's smart. He figured this out. Great. And then, of course, the very next scene is like, only an idiot would, show off that he's making all this money. He drives up in a Ferrari or whatever.
And he's made like 80,000 one week or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So it's very hard to sort of like, I guess he's a savant at computers, but the funny thing is this movie or the script, it doesn't understand what computers can do, or like
not. Yeah,
it's the early 80s, so it's like it's a fad,
sure,
and everybody thinks that the potential is limitless.
Yes.
Well, you can use a computer to change a weather satellite into a weather changing machine.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Like I can understand he pushes a button and a bunch of money starts coming out of the ATM
Sure.
and everything. It is funny again, the sort of script writing somersaults. They established that Perry White has this trip giveaway. He doesn't want to do it. Somebody from his office wins it. They end up in the same place that Gus Gorman points the weather satellite at in Columbia. Then they end up back at the Daily Planet. They're complaining because they got hurt, and Superman saved the day. It's so convoluted.
Yes.
Well,
yeah, and that's the thing is like I can forgive a lot, but you can't forgive that stuff, obviously. Well, I can forgive it, but it is ridiculous, Now, I do want to talk about those scenes that you mentioned, because those are arguably the only times in the movie, in the Superman franchise, where the film gets experimental, because we don't see the action as it's happening. Gus refers to it in flashback, and we see him we hear him describing what Superman's doing, and we cut to these shots. It's so unusual. Like, why did they choose to do it that way? I just thought it was really cool to see him describing what Superman's doing, even though it's done for comedic effect.
I think it's a lot cheaper to do it that way.
Yeah, it kind of felt like a cop-out to me.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
it kind of felt as though they didn't want to put the thought into actually weaving this properly into the story. So we're just going to do some flashbacks, whatever.
Yeah. I don't know, but I still did think that it was cool enough that I liked it because it was different. It was just something different.
Right.
I don't know.
There are some good jokes with the. It's interesting the way that these movies treat women, because it's the 80s, right?
Yes.
So, you got the bimbo who's actually really smart.
Right.
And then you got the sister. The first thing Gus says is, "Oh, I didn't know your mom's going to be here." Yes. I'm his younger sister, know.
Yeah.
She's the brains, but not really. It's strange. Sometimes when you watch these movies now that are 30, 40 years old,
Sure,
and you see the way that women are depicted, it's kind of, it's strange.
It's very 80s. There's also, I think, a little bit of, I don't want to say homophobia, but I think the suggestion is that she's lesbian. Is she lesbian? Is she too manly? Is she this? And again, it's the 80s. Okay, fine. We'll forgive it. But yeah, then the way that the other character is, the bimbo, the way it's interesting, because I thought this is, the 20th time I've seen this movie, or maybe 50th, but she also has a secret identity. She has to portray a bimbo in order to fit in with these characters, but she's actually, we see her reading Immanuel Kant, and
right.
She understands the computer better than anyone understands. So that's kind of interesting, So it's almost like they're aware of all the stereotypes, but they're playing against them, which I thought was cool, So what'd you think of that, Ian?
I don't know. I thought that kind of felt a little cheap too, right? Like,
okay,
it didn't feel to me as though they were trying to be in any way progressive. It's just like, oh, we're just gonna subvert your expectations in an easy way, right? Oh, the bimbo's actually really smart. Great, that's brilliant, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, it felt like an easy way to try and make people laugh.
Okay. So let's jump back to the plot for a bit here. So we have Clark go back to Smallville, which I think is really cool because, I love the Superboy comics. It's like separate from the Superman comics, because the Superboy comics are all set in Smallville, on the farm, in the general store in Smallville. So it was cool to see Lana Lang again.
I like it because it grounds the character, because he's an alien from this far off planet. Right. He's got all these crazy powers. It's all that's all very fantastical. But you're like, no, he went to high school, and he went to the prom, and there was a girl he liked, and she got picked up by the high school football star. Yep. Like, we can all relate to that. Sure. It makes the character very, very grounded, and makes him an Earthling essentially.
That's a good point. And also, just to give her the story of, she married the captain of the football team, and she has a kid, and she's now a single mother. It makes her a great character, I think. And then I love even the little touch of showing the high school photos of those actors when they were younger.
That's right.
Christopher Reeve and Ed O'Toole when they were younger. That was
really
cool. Yeah.
Those actual there.
Yeah, that was actually them, because obviously
photos.
the first movie, it wasn't Christopher Reeve as a teenager. It was a different actor, right?
Yeah.
But
I even like, there's little touches like he's eating the pate. Yeah. And she says, "Oh, that's not pate, that's dog food." And most times the actor would like do a spit take. Yeah. Right? But he reaches in and grabs another bit and he's like, "Actually, it's not quite bad." and you're like, that's great performance. That's subverting our expectation.
Yes. Actually, that reminds me, that whole scene is actually very good when they go for the picnic. Right. And then the boy and the dog go for a walk and they disappear. And then in the middle of him talking to Lana Lang, he hears, is it the dog crying?
Right. Yeah. But Lana Lang is not, damsel in distress. She's like, my car is leaking. Yes. I'm going to go over and fix it.
That's right.
Right? Like that's what she's doing in that moment. She's not
that's a good point. Good observation.
Again, as a female character, she's actually quite strong in the movie.
That's a good point. Yeah. And I love the fact that, again, this is small stakes. It's just a one boy who's knocked out because, he fell in a rock. He's knocked out. And we just see, what are those things called?
Combines.
Combines coming towards him. And I love the fact that Superman stops the combine. And do you see, remember he glares? He looks at the guy like... I mean, it's not the guy's fault. It's not his fault, but I just love that extra touch of Christopher Reeve. Like, you almost killed this kid. Like, it's just so well done.
And he has a lot of fun with the Superman was here. Oh, really? Him again? Yeah. I see him every day.
Yeah, yeah. That was so well done. Okay, so then I got to say, the 80s computer stuff, I'll watch War Games any day of the week, okay, with Matthew Broderick. You ever seen that movie, Ian?
I have not.
Oh, my God. Okay, we're going to create a new podcast just about war games, okay? We're just going to talk about war games. If you love computers, you should watch it. It's all about Matthew Broderick's character hacking into, I think it's the ICBM missile system, I think, right? Anyway, it's a classic. Mm-hmm. But this movie reminded me of that 80s. Again, it's like you said, it's like computers were sorcery to the general public. They didn't know they worked. All that stuff at the beginning with him in the class, all that stuff of him, with, what's the guy's name? Brad. Getting Brad drunk, and then he has to override the computer, but he has to put the keys in at the same time. I love that shit. Like, just that little extra touch. The writers could have just had him do it in one try.
Right.
But the fact that he has to go back and drag him.
And he's drunk.
And tie up his hand and pull it. I love that stuff. And then that stuff's so good. Then we get to, let's talk about Evil Superman. We pretty much talked about Evil Superman, but that's
it's even though, to Ian's point, maybe it doesn't make any sense, but it's my favorite scene in it, my favorite section in the whole movie.
Absolutely.
Again, because Christopher Reeve, it's like, okay, he can play Clark Kent, he can play Superman. Now he's playing a third character,
You're right.
Evil Superman, and it's totally believable. You're like, yeah, that guy's evil, and it's just it's subtle. It's a 5 o'clock shadow. Mm-hmm. They darkened his costume.
Yep.
And it's just the way that he's acting and he's behaving, and it's totally believable.
He's a different character. Like you said, his body language when he's in the bar, he's got that snarl on his face. When he walks out and all the crowd is around, I'm like, Superman, what's wrong or whatever. And he's like stumbling down the sidewalk. His body language, his gait is actually different. When he's fighting himself as Clark Kent, again, Clark Kent is Clark Kent. He's got his hunched over and like pushing up his glasses, but Evil Superman is kind of like got that swagger, and then he's throwing Clark Kent into the whatever that's called, the compactor, the trash compactor. It's just excellent.
That was a mildly terrifying scene there too, watching him get crushed in that.
That's what I mean. It's like, again, and that's also why I think you mentioned how much it was on when we were kids. As a kid especially, you're like, this is brutal.
I gotta imagine that whoever wrote The Boys and the character of Homelander had to have seen Superman 3. You know what I mean?
Yep. I think you're right. That's probably where the idea comes from. But it was just so well done. And again, the dark suit, the 5 o'clock shadow, and we should also mention Superman gets laid.
Right.
He does have sex with the bimbo.
Right.
Oh, that's right.
And she's actually not that this matters. She actually is very beautiful. And she's a good actress, because later on when she says to Superman, honey, don't you remember me? And he's like, I don't know you, lady. The look on her face is genuine. She's actually hurt. It's great. It's a great little moment, right? I thought it was excellent. But anyway, all that good stuff unfortunately comes to an end. Then we get to the weird third act, which isn't quite as strong. But this is where Gus puts in his request to have his supercomputer built. Now, there are some good moments we mentioned where the sister gets turned into a computer monster.
Terrifying.
And it's actually awesome.
It's really well done, at least the transformation part, because basically they did, stop motion on a human. So it's all kind of practical where they literally add a piece, shoot a frame, add a piece, shoot a frame. And it is kind of terrifying. It makes no fucking sense.
No, but who cares?
That a human would turn into a computer, makes no sense. But now strangely, she has the same finger laser power that the supervillains in Superman 2 suddenly developed out of nowhere. She has that same, frosty laser power that can move objects. But I like when he's having to evade the missiles, and it's kind of like a video game.
Yes.
I think in the early 80s, everybody was used to these Missile Command and all these games that in the arcade that would have reminded them of.
Sure.
I'm sure they even probably did a tie-in video game somewhere for that movie. I'm not sure.
I actually did a bit of research into that because that's the first thing that I thought, like, oh, this has to be.
Sure.
There must have been a Superman video game released in 1982 to tie in with this.
Was there?
But no, actually the Superman Atari game came out in the late 70s.
Oh,
it came out with the first film.
Interesting. How did it look?
Not as good as the special effects in this one. This one blew it away.
We talked about special effects, but even like the visuals of them being in that valley and taking the balloons down or whatever, that was all great.
There's money. Like when you watch this movie, you're like, for whatever its failings are, if you compare it especially to the movie that came after it, at least they still had budget. Like some of the effects aren't great or whatever, but nothing's like horrible and takes you right out of the movie.
Right.
You can excuse a lot of it. You go, okay, early 80s. And I think that in terms of like the level of quality they were going for, it's nowhere near what they were trying to do with the first movie.
Sure.
But I also think they're not like, well, we can't just have it be a piece of crap. Like it has to be passable.
Right. We should also mention that it was a success, not as big as the first two, but in 1983 it grossed 80 million, which was pretty freaking big at the time, right?
But that's, to be fair though, that's only on the back of two successful films before it, right? Like, and I don't think that like once people saw it, they went home and told their friends to go see Superman 3. I think they probably said, it was okay.
Yeah. That's fair. So I don't know. I guess that like the thing is me watching it for the 50th time, I enjoyed it more than previous times. Ian, this is only your first time in your adult life, but overall, what do you think about this movie?
I'm going to give this movie a 6 out of 10.
Okay.
It had some really strong scenes, but it had a bunch of weird fluff that it just had me sort of like, I don't know, tonal whiplash. It was kind of all over the place there. Now, and it didn't have a strong enough villain.
That's true.
In my opinion.
I would agree with that.
If Brainiac would have kind of materialized halfway through, that would have really helped the last half of the movie.
Especially if he had the monkey on his shoulder.
Exactly.
Like
Yes.
I could see them saying, okay, the first movie we had a human villain. The second movie we had space villains. The third movie we'll go back to human video. To do a third movie to have another space villain, essentially, maybe that was the reasoning. It almost feels like it was written to be Lex Luthor, and they're like, they couldn't get Hackman back, or they couldn't afford him, or they're just like, nah, maybe the audience doesn't want Lex Luthor, but we're not going to rewrite the whole thing.
But he also had a falling out. He didn't come back for the Superman 2 reshoots, so I think he just boycotted this film. Right? Yeah.
But it feels like maybe it was written as a Lex Luthor.
Sure, 100%. And to be fair, Robert Vaughn he did do some commercials or something, because that's what I know him from. Didn't he?
He's a good actor. Like
he's fine, but his voice is so distinctive that he sounds like that guy.
Yeah, I don't think he gives a bad performance. No. It's just not a good, well-written character.
I ask you to kill Superman, and you can't even do that one simple thing. There's some good lines in there.
No, but I could, Gene Hackman with that line would have...
Sure.
It would have been over the top.
Yeah,
great.
That's true. Now, you said you gave it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
I checked my IMDb rating. I gave it an 8 out of 10. And this was 10 years ago, but still.
I'd go... For the first Superman movie, I'd give it a 9. The second one, I'd give it a 7. This one, I would agree, it'd be between 5 and 6 for me. The things that kind of drive me crazy and also make me laugh are the complete leaps of logic. Like the boy throwing the bowling ball down the alley, Superman sneezes. It completely obliterates the pins. Yeah. And of course the kids are amazed, but like there's no fallout from that. They're like, wait a minute, how did that even happen?
Yes.
Right?
Try that again.
There's a lot of like, things that make no sense that kind of take it down a notch.
I think the only thing in the movie I absolutely would have taken out is the cartoon Walkman climbing up into the stop man. That was too much.
That's almost the movie saying I give up.
Yeah.
Right?
It's completely insane because there's no... Now listen, we're talking about an alien that came from, and he's got powers, and so like it's already a leap of logic, but still, that's way over the top.
Yep. Okay, so... we haven't really talked about deleted scenes. We're going to talk briefly about them, but there's a TV cut of this film, isn't there?
There is. It's, I think 15 to 20 minutes longer, but it's mostly just scene extensions.
Okay.
It's not like there was major plot points removed. It's certainly not like Superman 2, not like Superman 4. Superman 1 has some significant deleted scenes, but in this movie, there's nothing really significant that was cut.
Okay.
It's another 10 minutes of the walk, don't walk guys fighting.
No, but you know what? Actually, they're on the Blu-ray that I have, the previous Blu-ray, not the new Blu-ray. And like you said, extended scenes, like when Gus is on the roof before he falls off, there's much longer parts of him talking. And like, the Brad scene with him getting drunk is a little bit longer. But yeah, it's just stuff like that. There's nothing significant.
I do like the actor that plays Brad. I think it's good casting. He plays it really well.
Agree.
Like because he's a dick, but you don't hate him 100%.
Because he's kind of pathetic.
Right.
You gotta, I don't know what he said. Brad, you gotta, I don't know what he says, this line, but it's really good.
Yeah, he's working as a security guard. He was the king of the fucking school in high school, but now he's a security guard,
Yeah, you're right. If I could remember the line, it'd be hilarious. But anyway, so there you go, Superman 3. I still have, this is the one that I remember when this movie came out, I had like the Superman 3 movie book, the Superman 3, whatever. And so this was when I was just getting into Superman. So it has a spot in my heart. So I'll always love Superman 3. I love Annette O'Toole. Watch Smallville. Watch the whole series. Don't worry, there's only 10 seasons. So there you go with Superman 3. We want to thank Jordan Krug for joining us.
Happy to be back.
Absolutely. We want to thank Champion for joining us.
Thank you very much. I hope Josh is happy with my performance wherever he may be right now.
And Josh is sick, but I hope he gets well 5 weeks from now when we review Superman 4. And that's when Jordan will be back. So hopefully you're good by then, Josh. And anyway, be sure to join us on the next episode. I don't know what it is because I haven't checked the schedule, but it's going to be an awesome one.
Do your research.
So there you go. Yeah, we refuse to do research, even for our own show. But until the next time, see you later.